Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be the second part of my presentation series on my new layout. If you haven't watched the first one, I talk about my plans for developing a new layout, or my plans to develop a layout plan. I had 3 steps that I wanted to focus on, and this video is going to be focusing on step 1, developing the actual layout plan itself. In the first video, I also talked about the difference between a plan and a design. I highly encourage you to check out the first video. It's based on a lot of principles by Lance Mindheim, and I'm going to be continuing to talk about the principles that he uses for layout design and layout building in this presentation series. So be sure to check that out. Okay, so I've spent the last week or so working on the questions from the first video. And I think I've got some good answers. I've certainly taken, I think, as much time as I need to answer these questions. They're pretty basic, but they do provide a lot of insight into how I'm going to design my layout in the near future. So let's get started. So the first question that Lance asks us to reflect on is, what aspect or aspects of the hobby do I truly enjoy the most? So first and foremost is operations. I want my layout to be operations based. Second to that is scenery. I think I'm okay at scenery, but I definitely want to grow my skills in this area, so I want to focus on that. Structures are 50-50 in second place. I do like structures. However, I've always just bought kits and assembled them and painted them. I'm thinking maybe I should try scratch building or kit bashing versus store-bought kits. That'll be an aspect I will focus on, but it's second or third in the list. The layout, especially in the early phases of this layout, I want to just focus on getting the track down, wired properly, and focusing on operations and how to enhance that. Next up is, what resources can I, without question, consistently bring to the hobby? And he's asking us to reflect on the resources such as time, energy, and overall commitment level to the project itself. So I thought about this, and I would say it's going to be typically around 3 to 4 hours per week for time commitment. And then energy. Energy, it's going to be limited due to work, but I would say that overall I can commit some time, the 3 to 4 hours per week, every week, or most weeks. I would say most weeks throughout the year. And then the overall time commitment over a longer period of time would be 5 years dedicated to this project. I think I'd like to spread it out over 5 years. So again, the early parts of the project, once I get the bench work constructed, track down the wiring, I just want to focus on operating it and really focusing on slowing down everything and operating it in a more prototypical manner. Next question. If I build a layout, how am I going to interact with it? Will my satisfaction come from being an operator, rail fan, or simply the joy and satisfaction of building things? So again, this is operations focused, so the satisfaction will primarily come from it being an operations focused layout. I do love building something, and while I do like to get a project completed and I like the feeling that comes from building the overall layout, like I mentioned in the first video, I rushed the current layout way too quick. I was so eager to get the layout constructed that I ran into a lot of troubles, a lot of things that have led me to this point where I need to build another layout to be happy. I want to build it, I want it to be completed, but I want to make sure that I can use this thing day in and day out, and I'm going to be happy with it for many years to come. So the next question, what is my commitment to self-awareness to find something that truly interests me? I thought that this was a really interesting question. Now, I'm a pretty self-aware person. I do a lot of self-reflection, and particularly if we use the current layout as an example, I've obviously become self-aware that it wasn't working. So I think a lot of the self-awareness has come from previous projects, not just the current one, but prior ones as well. But I want to focus on expanding on my desires, what I truly want, not just to build a layout, but really think about why I'm in this hobby. You know, I need to grow in that. Obviously, I need to expand on this and understand it a bit more, but the current layout has obviously sparked something in me to realize that I have to make a change. And continuing on, the design is going to reflect operations with secondary focus on scenery and structures. So I know that that is what truly interests me. So what is my attention span for a given theme? So I know for me, I don't want to have one layout I'm going to keep forever. I do like to build things and learn new techniques, and eventually this new layout will be completed, or as completed as it can be, as we all know. Anyone that's in this hobby, a layout's never really truly completed. So I wanted to give myself a fair time frame, thinking around 4 to 5 years for the current layout theme. Now, again, this can always be changed if I wanted, or as I've shown here, the layout's going to be small enough I can actually build another layout in the next room if space allows in the future. So Lance Mindheim asks, if your primary interest is operations, what type of operations? So I kind of mentioned this, I think, in the first video, but I prefer switching versus like mainline freight or passenger operations. So I want to focus obviously on switching out a variety of customers or building trains in a classification yard. I really do enjoy the classification yard aspect. So obviously this is something that I'm going to need to consider when I put the actual layout design together. I thought this was really interesting. Do you even need a layout? Well, I think for me, yes, I do need a layout. I have a love of trains, obviously, and railroading in general, but I want to create a world that's operational. I want that world that I create to have a purpose. While I do like the idea of a static display or a diorama, I don't think that that would suit my current modeling needs or my current desires. So the next few questions are actually from the How to Design a Small Switching Layout book. And Lance asks about current skills. And this is something I think every modeler should reflect on, like where they're at with their skill level. So I've included basic to intermediate carpentry, basic wiring, basic to intermediate track work, basic scenery, basic structure work. And then I wrote here a little note on the bottom. I want to enhance skills in all facets, but I really want to focus on track work and wiring, and then a secondary focus on the scenery and the structures. Put the track work and the wiring first because with the current build, although I did it much better than I have in the past, there were certain techniques that I used that just didn't work. I really want to change those or use something different because I just don't like the way that the track came out on the current layout. So the next question is space constraints or limits. Now this is obviously very important to consider. You have to know the space that you're working in. So I need to stick to this current 9-foot by 9-foot room, which for HO scale is not very large. And I reflected on this in the first video. Now I want to stick to it, but I need to actually leave a space for a workbench. And I also need to leave space probably underneath the layout for storage shelves or storage bins, something to keep all my items in. That's another area that I didn't really consider before. So there's stuff everywhere right now, which is kind of annoying. So I definitely need to figure out, one, where I can do my work separate from the layout and where I can store things. So I don't have to store things on the layout or on the floor or anything like that. So budget, obviously very important. The hobby, pretty expensive. So I figured, okay, 5-year time period, 5-year for the theme. I'm thinking 3 to 5K over a 5-year period for the budget. So the next question, what era do I want to model? Obviously, this is pretty important. Now, I've tried to model a few different eras, but modern has always been what I've come back to, and I'd like to continue with that. And a lot of the rolling stock that I currently have is modern era. So knowing this, I'm going to have to really think about the track radius in the future and make sure that the track radius matches up with the length of the rolling stock that I want to use. So what is the theme? The overall theme I defined as the modern New England short line freight movement. I want it to be modern, as I mentioned before. Previous video I mentioned New England. I currently live in New England, but I love New England and I love the scenes. I love short lines and I like freight movement. So I figured, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to model. And we're going to expand on this idea in the next video. So the number of operators and session length. This is something I never really thought about until I was about halfway through the current layout build. I figured it was going to be me and maybe one other person, but I wasn't sure. So I built the layout with the idea that 2 people would operate it. But it's not something that happens as often as I would have liked. So I have to think about it in terms of mainly being a solo operator. And what that means that the session length will have to be shorter as well. So I thought for me, the ideal session length would be less than 1 hour. Now, the level of overall detail for a completed layout. I put moderate level of detail because I want to focus on, again, on operations and scenery and structures. And I might include some vehicles and figures, but that's obviously going to be, way down the line, at least a few years. But I don't think I want to detail it to the extreme. So proto or freelance? This is obviously a very important question. So continuing from my idea a couple videos ago, the Prescott Terminal Railway, I want to expand on that idea. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to model the railway as a whole, meaning it's going to be the Prescott Terminal Railway and that's it, or if I'm going to have something maybe like a branch line off of a different railroad, like a Class 1, for instance, so it would be the Prescott Terminal Branch. So I need to think about how I want to approach that. But I'm thinking it's going to be a freelance location with a real or freelance railroad. So I could model, like I said, a Class 1 or the Prescott Terminal. I can actually model that and get into painting and applying decals and that sort of thing. So that's all I have for the questions. I wanted to go ahead and kind of create a reflection summary so we could see everything in one slide. So again, this is going to be an operations-focused layout on both customers and a classification yard, and a secondary focus on scenery and structures. The time commitment overall will be approximately 3 to 4 hours per week over a 5-year time period. The space constraint will be 9 feet by 9 feet, and I need to dedicate a space to a workbench. I also forgot to mention the storage that I mentioned earlier in the video, but this is also going to be a core part of the space constraint. I need to make sure I can fit adequate storage either underneath or somehow into the layout. Next is the budget. It's going to be 3 to 5K over a 4 to 5 year construction time frame. Then we have the modern era with the theme of a New England short line and freight operations on the short line. Continuing on, single operator layout. These sessions have to be less than 1 hour. Ideally 30 to maybe 45 minutes, but no more than an hour. And then we're going to focus on a moderate level of overall detail when completed. And this is going to be with a freelance location and a proto-freelanced railroad. Now, some of these details can change as I reflect a little bit more on the plan, but I'm going to use these bullet points here to really define how the layout design is going to look. I'm going to take obviously some ideas from the previous layout, such as the Prescott Terminal. I'd like to include that. I also really like the idea of possibly using some of the same industries that I have on the current layout, but I'm not sure yet. So again, I'm going to take this information here, and I'm going to start to work on the beginning stages of a design in the next presentation. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.